Hello and welcome to the DnDebrief. This is the RPGeeks, and this is our fortnightly show discussing science loosely based on the last episode of Dungeons and Dragons and Science. So this is our second DnDebrief episode. Welcome. We've got some very exciting topics today. But before we delve into the science, I've been nominated to do a story recap. Which I don't know how that happened. I thought I could give that to the DM, who is supposed to know about these things. But
you know how like when they ask for a volunteer to step forward, the other three of us just all step back, and then Shamini was left in front.
that is what happened. Although actually, before I do the story recap, we should introduce ourselves. That would probably be pertinent to the situation. So hello there. My name is Shamini. I use she/her pronouns. I play Tenebris in Dungeons and Dragons and Science. And I'm a science video producer by day. Ali.
I am DM for this adventure, but not for this. The D&D brief. I'm just another person. And I, too, make videos. Sometimes, Simon.
Oh, I thought that the sometimes was going to be relating to the subject of the video.
When the sun is in the middle of the sky.
Sometimes they're on science. Sometimes they're Simon. Yes.
Videos on Simon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Simon. I use he/him pronouns. And if you've been on this channel before, you'll know I was once a productive member of society, and then I became a YouTuber and a streamer. And I mostly make videos and streams about science, but occasionally Warhammer, and now D&D. And that just leaves hang on, where is she on the screen? She's below me on the screen. That just leaves Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I am a science video producer by day, and by night / in this game, I play Infinite Sky 6000, who is a druid droid, and I love her.
So, key things that I think people should know before we dive into this. Vague story recap. We've met 3 characters on the planet of Braxigantu. They've just arrived at a mining colony. They nearly got robbed and or kidnapped before being recruited onto a mission to find some smugglers by the head of the mining colony. That was top secret, and that was all going well until they ended up going to a pub. And it may not have been as secret as all that.
We told the Medi mechanic before as well.
And it may have been mentioned amid lots of shh. Oh, the thing we don't say. Yeah, things we don't say.
But what's a Medi mechanic?
Oh my god, that's so relevant to today's topic of science. Should we do that one first? Medicine, nanites.
Oh yeah, the medicine.
So Ali just threw in. We met this Medi mechanic, and she had like a gun tube thing, and Ali just threw in here are some nanites for you.
It was like a sort of, less of a gun tube thing, more of like a hypodermic syringe mounted onto a small gun.
In my head, it looks
like a gun-like thing.
In my head, it's like a MacGuffin. You know, it's just it looks like every item in a sci-fi film that's you must take this vial to the planet core or whatever. Yes. One of those.
Okay, let's not explain how this works.
Yeah, quick, there's no time.
Yeah.
It's quantum.
Yeah, exactly.
Is nanite the new quantum? When we're talking about sci-fi medicine, is nanite the new quantum?
Do they have to be exclusive? Can we do both?
Quantum nanites?
Why not both?
But what's a nanite? I'm going to do that this episode.
What is a nanite? When you said nanites, I went, I don't know what a nanite is.
It's a very old ite. It's the second generation.
In game terms, it just turned out to be a potion of healing. But of course, the point is that all of our D&D effects and features can be explained through science. And nanites is... I thought nanites was going to be a very sci-fi term, and that no one would ever actually use nanites. But nanites is not too out there. But nanobots is more common as a sort of subcategory of nanotechnology. We're talking about things at the nanoscale, basically. Robots at the nanoscale. And obviously, in the game, it was medicine, and that is a big potential application for nanotechnology.
So is nanite like a subset of nanobot?
Yeah.
No, it's just
what is
another...
a nanite? Is that a word Ali made up?
Word. No, it's a word that some people use, but I would say it was equivalent to nanobot. Would you agree,
Yeah,
Ali?
I mean, so when you see a robot as well, I mean, presumably if you're down at the kind of nanite level, I don't know how wide an atom is. It's an angstrom, but I don't know how wide an angstrom is.
It's about a tenth of a nanometer.
Right, so you've got 10 nanometers. So I guess you could build a tiny little you could build a robot, couldn't you? Maybe.
Well, this big question that I've had when I've been looking this up, which is how do you define a robot? Which is definitely easier said than done. But I've got some examples of cool sort of nanobot health technologies, and maybe at the end you can tell me whether you think they count as robots or not.
Are you? Is it really a robot?
Is it really a robot? What is a robot?
Yeah, what's the great problem with defining a robot? I would have assumed that was quite easy to define.
Yeah.
I have a tab open with definition of robot, and it's quite varied. I've got a mechanical device that works automatically or by computer control, a machine capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically, any automatically operated machine that replaces human effort.
Has anybody seen The World's End, with Simon Pegg?
Yeah.
It's a film. Yeah. So they're constantly saying with that, actually, robot is from an old Czech word.
Forced labour or something?
Which means slave.
Isn't it?
Forced labour. Yeah. It's in Rossum's Universal Robots. RUR is the name of the work that it comes from.
So I guess they are slaves, right? You just make them to do something, and they do it for you, and they have no will.
They do it for you. They do something automatically.
But is the difference between that and slave? I know that there is like a huge ethical, like moral problem with like robots in sci-fi in general. Like the whole fact that in Star Wars, for example, robots clearly have individual personalities, and yet they are treated as property and slaves. It's like it's like a really weird thing when you actually start thinking about it. That it's
like
just
murdered a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's just a subhuman slave class that like we're okay with just sacrificing.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that will come up with like Infinite Sky 6000 is
someone already tried to own her.
Right, and you know, she appears to have free will. Does anyone have free will? Let's not go down that road. But yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, but this is really important for the nanite stuff as well, because at what point do you say, you know, these little things have free will and can they no longer be controlled? Is that not what we're saying?
But what is free will? Sorry.
No, don't. Simon, stop it right now.
The kind of, let me give you an idea of the kind of level we're at the moment, because you can, the idea is that, we're looking at current sort of cutting edge science and thinking of where that could go. But the limitation, like a huge part of this limitation is scale into what these things can do. Because a skin cell is maybe like 30 micrometers, I think. Red blood cell is maybe like 6, 7, 8 micrometers. And a nanometer is obviously thousandths of a micrometer, and anything under a micrometer kind of counts as nano. But we're at the scale of like molecules and proteins, and when you're sort of thinking about like nanoscale machinery, proteins and DNA, and we mentioned on our last debrief the kinesin molecule walking along the
then we all immediately started doing the dance.
Thing. It's like a little machine, right? So what we're doing is kind of creating artificial equivalents, or even just using biological processes. DNA origami. People like make stuff out of DNA.
I love that stuff.
So
That's so interesting.
Is it fair to say that actually, we're filled with nanorobots already? We're just making
biological
better ones for our usage.
Yeah.
But no, but what is biological? What does that mean? They're just made out of
naturally occurring. No, but synthetic, I suppose. Did we make them, or did they evolve?
All right, so it's about. So
if you're creating it, it's not a naturally occurring thing in your body.
But we're naturally occurring. We're just the natural process that's creating another thing.
Yeah, and you wouldn't call yourself a robot, would you?
Naturally designed
but
cars,
just because we make something, it's still natural, right? Because we are a natural process.
This is going down the everything is chemicals route, and we're not playing that game. Simon's being a little troll today. It's like, what is free will?
Last week that we were firmly in the physics camp, and like now we're in biology land, and all I can hear is the music from the magic roundabout whenever we start talking about anything biological. So
welcome.
It'd be the magic school bus actually for this one because they shut down.
I love the magic
What an amazing show.
That's what it is. Okay, can we just confirm now that actually what all the healing potions are is lots of little doctors shrunk right down that you eat?
Well, they all troop
They're
into a
school
little bus.
children, damn it!
Okay, but maybe let's make them doctors rather than school children.
Yeah, it'd be better.
Did anybody watch the sort of French animation of which had little blood cells, which are little red people with backpacks with oxygen bubbles in them, and they would just walk around?
No, but that sounds
No,
lovely.
did you make this up in a dream?
Where all the little white blood cells would,
Oh,
like,
it was so
march
lovely.
around and solve your body's problems. It was great. Right, can I give you an example of a cool
Yes.
nanotech
Please
thing?
do.
So we have something to base this on, right? Okay, so it could be something like this. You take some, so in this case, DNA origami. This was a paper from a few years ago, I think. Take a flat thing, stick some thrombin in it, little molecules, stick them in.
Thrombin.
It's a blood clotting agent. Why would you want to do that, you say? Oh, well, let me explain. What you do is fold up the little DNA sheets, the thrombin stuck inside, and you stick some little nucleotide sequences on that recognise molecules on the surface of cancer cells.
Oh.
And you go, there you go, little
That's like
dots.
a Trojan horse.
And it only opens when it's locked in. It opens, it causes blood clotting, starves the tumours.
Amazing!
That's amazing. So is that a thing? Sorry, is that a thing that's happening or they're looking at doing at the moment?
I don't think any of these things are in clinical use at the moment.
Okay.
I don't think.
How do you even
any of this
assemble that
is.
though? Like, surely you can't go in with a pair of tweezers.
Tiny
You
tweezers.
know.
Don't you do it by coding it and so it all like folds in a certain way?
Ooh.
But like you have to. These sound like basically
Yeah.
protein cannelloni. Like you've got to put them in the middle and then roll them up. Like
Delicious.
that's a mechanical process, surely. But how do you control that?
You make it chemical. You
No.
make all this
Yeah.
chemical, right? You make it all do it automatically. That's the point of DNA origami, is that DNA binds to specific things and thus will automatically conglomerate into a specific form.
Yeah, you've got to like get down there. So when you're at that level, it's like it's not like you're just sitting there looking at these sort of like bits of connects on a table. Like everything is being attracted or pushed away from everything else. Like there's viscosity involved. There's all sorts of forces sort of pulling in all different directions. If you can control them, you can shape stuff. It's my understanding.
Yeah.
So you could either have nanobots, which, and I think in the nanites in the health potion, this is clearly things that are just acting automatically. But you could have ones that are like controlled by like sound or magnetism or something.
Sound?
which
It's like they
like
hear someone
outside
screaming and they're just like,
control
"Quick,
Save them!
clot
Wait,
that
does
blood!"
that mean we could have an acoustically activated healing potion, whereas you drink it, you go, fix me, and then they start going to work.
You could have acoustically activated so much stuff, like spells. That's a get out of jail free card right there.
Yeah, that's actually really
But
good.
like shit, okay, right, yeah. But if you have this on a nano scale, you're going to have some kind of processing for the sound, right? Not to pour cold water on this, but you would have to process the audio that it's receiving, and then be like, wait a minute, wait till he says the keyword, wait till he says, heal me, and that's like
that's quite complex.
So take these nanites and this computer.
Well, what
Don't
if,
ask which
right,
orifice it needs to go in.
What if instead
Pick one.
of like a word, right, all you're doing is trying to hit a certain pitch or a frequency or whatever, right? So instead of like words, magic becomes basically a sort of song that you're trying to hit.
Going
Like,
like,
So you get stabbed and you're like, that's so much better. You must hit precisely 447.5 hertz.
I cannot wait to edit the podcast noise of this.
Why is there a dolphin in this section of the podcast?
yeah, exactly. I take a dolphin with me wherever I go.
So where we are at the moment is that they're trying to design all the components. So they're making like, can we make an enclosing thing? Can we make a hinge? Can we make a motor? can we make like a tiny propeller so it can propel itself along? And
That
they've
thing
done
exists.
loads of things. Yeah.
We have ATP synthase, I think, is the molecule in the protein in mitochondria, which attaches phosphate to ADP, right? And it's basically a little propeller. It just goes round and round and round and round and round like that. So couldn't we take that from biology and just be like, we'll have that?
Just nick it. Yeah, there was some examples where they just took the flagellum off a bacterium, the little wiggly tail that they have to get around. They were just like, we'll have that.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Around.
That's amazing. Oh my God, that puts a whole different spin on it. Suddenly these things are like little sperms zooming around your body. It's like, where we go.
And there was another one which was chemical, and I think it was like had hydrogen peroxide, and it made it turned it into oxygen, and the little oxygen bubbles just like propelled it along, I think. Chemical propulsion.
Okay,
as well.
so this is like mechanically how these things work. The other component though is like if we're saying that a health potion is made of nanites, but then how would a nanite restore hit points?
What is the health?
What is a hit point?
What is
a hit point? Here we go.
Right. What I would like to propose is that the basis of it is wound healing. Because what else do you really need in D&D? You just go around getting stabbed and shot, and then you take a health potion and you don't bleed to death. Like,
some of us receive psychological wounds, like when someone tries to stab us.
There's also actual psychic damage.
I mean, that blood clotting thing would be really useful if you're bleeding out and you can send the nanites to there and they can like instantly form like a protective barrier.
How about this?
Yeah, nice.
What about a set of nanites which crosses the blood-brain barrier, jumps in, and will get inside neurons and stop them from laying down memory. So you receive hold up, just let me finish, right? So you receive some horrific psychic blow, like some awful like illithid has made you imagine the death of yourself or someone dear to you over and over and over again, and you're like, oh my God,
I'm really scared that this is what we were in for because he's describing it.
And then you take the potion and in it goes, and it's like, whoop, that memory's gone. Don't worry, you're fine now.
Well, there is a spell called Modify Memory, so maybe that is what that is.
Although getting things into a cell through the cell membrane, much harder than just getting them in the bloodstream and around the cells.
Yeah, because even through the blood-brain barrier, I can never say it, blood-brain barrier, you've still then got to get into the nerve cell.
But also, is that how memory works? Is it because the way you described it is like Gromit laying down track in front of the train in like a close shape?
Well, so
neuroscience question mark.
I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, so it's like basically, they can change the strength of the connections between themselves, but to change that, they actually have to add little sort of machines to the cell membrane and physically change themselves. And to do that, they have to make proteins and shit, which requires going to the nucleus and being like, boom, we've got a load of proteins we've got to make. So what you can do is you can jump in and be like, no, you're never going to make it to the nucleus, so nothing gets modified, so the memory doesn't come in. Hey, true story.
There's so
alley on the way to the nucleus.
You're never going to make it to the nucleus, sunshine.
Whoa there.
I'm trying to stop us remembering all of this.
I had a professor in Oxford who said that when I was there, like in 2005, there was this paper published in Nature which said that they'd found this chemical which does that exact thing, right? It's a powder, and if it gets onto the brain, it will just stop that happening. And this professor said he'd ordered some to do some experiments, but no one in his lab was brave enough to actually open it. So it had been unused in the back of the fridge and remained there the entire time.
I was convinced you were going to say he ordered it but had no memory of doing so.
Yeah.
That could have been better.
That would be a better story. Can you get him to change that?
Like all the research is there on his desk, and it's just... But that's like a Looper kind of problem, because like surely you research and you read your own research to the point where you're like, oh, this is amazing, but no one else is going to test this, so I've got to try it. And then you forget everything and the whole thing resets. And there's just a dwindling amount of this
that's so
potion.
Good. Imagine meeting that character.
You'd have no... that could go on for years, and you'd have no memory. Like,
it could be us. We could have done it.
Think about, what do you do? It's a conundrum, right? That person is trapped in this loop and they're happy. Do you tell them the truth and break them out of it, or do you just let them while away the rest of their life?
We are going so philosophical today, everyone. I wasn't quite prepared for it. I do have a question around the nanites. And, we're talking about them in a very sort of biological thing. Obviously, I am playing Infinite Sky 6000, who is a droid. I don't have blood. Do I have blood? I don't think I have blood. So would the health potion work the same way?
How's something you're going to get around? But like that also, so for me, that prompts the second question. I have another question to answer your question, which is, do you have an equivalent of an immune system? Because you can take damage and you can heal.
Is it called Norton Antivirus?
I have.
You get a little
antivirus
sort
software.
of
Maybe
sound effect.
you have nanites. Maybe Infinite Sky has a nanite-based immune system.
That's
Maybe
such a good
what
idea.
Works, right? That's all just walking around making sure
also,
you're okay.
So,
Wow,
but the other
that would be
weird sort of question is, so if the potion can be drunk by a biological thing and by a mechanical thing and work the same way, does that mean that the nanites in the potion have some degree of adaptability? And so is it possible to make nanites that can decide which they're going to do?
I mean, definitely not right now.
Yeah, because right now, that's the thing, is that right now they're so simple and they're so specific, and I think if you swallowed them, I think they would just come out.
The other thing that comes to mind, though, is that, like, the only... Well, okay, I'm going to massively oversimplify, but, like, the reason that we have blood is that we are transporting material around the body, right? Like, you are taking, whether that's food or information or whatever it is, and putting it around the body. Why would a synthetic organism have need for that? Because surely it just needs a central nervous system and then localized mechanical components. Like, you're
assuming that nothing will ever
power.
change.
But like, I guess I don't see why a synthetic organism would need something like a circulatory system to transport, even if it was something seemingly useful like oil or... I mean, the closest thing I suppose would be a system that is just circulating energy, which is your wiring.
Wouldn't the reason a robot would have one the same reason that we do is that you have specializations. You have the area where the healing nanobots are made and the area that keeps the colour better, and you need to get them places.
Another one would be heat. Blood transports heat a lot,
dispersion.
and you would need to disperse heat from the...
And thinking about Infinite Sky being the terraforming robot that she is, she has a lot of biological material within her anyway for her spells and things like that. So maybe there is like more of a biological component than it looks like on the surface.
She's like a submarine for plants.
Yeah.
Just realised. Just this tiny little environment inside her where she keeps plants all happy and healthy.
That's so sweet.
Or you could view it as like a shark tank, I guess. Basically, a shark tank is kind of like a submarine, but for on land. It's a supramarine. You know, you're taking an environment to keep an organism happy and healthy, but you're putting it in an entirely hostile environment. It's like for humans, that's a submarine in oceans, whereas for sharks, that's like a fish tank. So in a way, a shark is like a fish tank.
With wheels.
Yeah. Why does it have to have wheels?
I have a cheat.
Shark gotta eat, man.
For our flexibility of... Sorry, I'm still thinking about a question from like 5 minutes ago, which is how does it work on both biological things? Are they adaptive? They're tiny. Instead of making them adaptive, put all the different nanobots that anyone could ever possibly need into your injection gun.
Perfect.
Nah, way too inefficient.
But also,
they're
like,
tiny. Why does it matter?
They're tiny.
But surely you'd also have to account for every alien physiology. Like, surely they would be specifically
We've
coded.
not met any aliens yet in our game.
True, yes.
True.
There's been mentions that they existed. Well, God.
But
Could
also,
there be a way of putting every possible one, but like a tiny, like even like one of each, right? And then once they go into a creature and they recognize they're the one that's working,
Like
they
the
start
immune
replicating.
system.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
antibody antigens. Inspiration from biology.
Wait, are we coming up with the immune system?
It's a portable immune
Reinvented.
system. That's all that it is. You're injecting a new immune system.
so if you had like... So if you've got these little tiny sort of nanite factories, right? So you inject yourself with like a zillion nanite factories, all of which do a different thing, and then they respond to the situation that's at hand. So then the nanite factory's like, boom, got to make loads of my nanite. And then they make it out of the stuff in your body, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that stuff is biological, or is that...
Yeah, let's make them eat biological. What we need to do is we need to make self-replicating tiny nanobots that consume human flesh in order to make more of themselves. And there is no way that this will ever end badly.
Yeah, that's the grey goo apocalypse. Is exactly what you just described.
That is not the great... That is not what we're calling it, Simon. We're calling it health potions.
Elliot owns 100% of the shares in this company.
I invested heavily. I am exposed.
Grey goo is just a myth pushed by the mainstream media.
I feel like most of the current research is avoiding self-replicating nanobots these days. I don't know whether it's in case of grey goo collapses. Well,
how
a lot
about
of issues
this,
if you're replicating things.
this nanobot, right? Which I think a large amount of us already have inside us. The AstraZeneca vaccine.
I've got
That's a
Pfizer,
nanobot, isn't it?
You know,
Pfizer.
Pfizer.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of nanotech stuff in vaccines, and this also comes back down to how you define like nanotechnology, because the Novavax vaccine that I think might still be in trial was like, oh yeah, nanotechnology, and their sort of nanoparticles is a bunch of the coronavirus spike proteins, but kind of like stuck together, and then they're like nanoparticle, and then instead of using mRNA, they just like spike proteins. Go, here you go,
take them. There you
suck
go.
it in, and you know, anything that's nanoscale is a nanoparticle. So I was kind of like, oh, what's the?
I'm still confused about what exactly is a nanite then? Is it just a construct that is less than a micron in size?
My definition. Well, I'm going to decide that a nanite is another word for nanobot, which is, I'm going to say a synthetic, as in like a human-made nanoscale device that performs a task. Is that too vague?
Well, it's an object that has a function, like a designed function.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost chemistry, though, isn't it? Because like a chemical can go in, respond to something, and change. Is that a robot? Probably not. Where's the line? I don't know.
Ooh, this is good.
Yeah.
So are we coming to a conclusion on what our health potions are?
I think loads of different nanobots. Okay, so to come back to my loads of different ones, there's a lot of cybernetics. There's a lot of people with cybernetic implants. They would need both. They would need the human healing. They would need the robot healing. You need to put it all in there.
I like the idea.
Universal healing potion.
I think your idea of the different ones and then they replicate if they're needed, because you don't necessarily have to have that vial completely full of nanites, do you? It could be a little few nanites and the rest is just the goo that they need to synthesize more of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Injecting a load of goo into your
Does that mean though? Like, let's say that you're a partially synthetic, partly organic life form. You inject it into one, like the synthetic part of you. Say the synthetic part is then healed, and then the organic part is still like So
no,
do you
because it travels round the system.
No, but surely with that logic of like you have like it's almost like a stem cell of the healing potion plus material that allows them to replicate. Their first contact is like, oh, this is synthetic, so I need to breed lots and lots of synthetic.
No, because it's specific to the injury. It will, if it finds an injury, it will a biological injury. It will synthesize wound healing.
Yeah. But what happens if say you receive slash damage, and so artificial and organic components have been damaged? It
will go around and find both. It's the same as the immune system. Like when it finds something, it's not one or the other. It can do multiple.
If you have two diseases, your body can fight them both at the same time.
But then how long does that last?
Horrible.
Like, because the way I'm imagining this is you have like a seed, a stem
2d4
particle.
1d4 plus 4.
Exactly. 1d4 plus 4 HP.
Because surely if they are just perpetually like, if they stay around for a long time, long enough to establish multiple injuries, then you're just constantly self-healing. So it feels like they need to be that in order for them to mimic the effect of a health potion. They need to have that seed particle.
Health potions last for it takes an action, right? I think to take one. So it's 6 seconds because they're not healing you again. If you get hit after that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's one thing that we're not sort of thinking about, which is basically your body is this incredibly violent, difficult environment for any small thing to be inside. So, you swallow these things, right? You've got 6 seconds and then suddenly, bang, they've been destroyed by the immune system. What is the problem, Simon?
Sorry. Nothing at all.
Before we move on from nanites, can I just tell you my favourite nano machine that I found?
Absolutely.
Which is some people designed a nano car. This was back in 2005. I don't know if you've heard about this. And it's technically a single molecule, and it's a bunch of like aromatic rings and stuff with 4 buckyballs, like Buckminster Fullerene spheres on the end. And they can make it move around, and they did studies to show that when it's moving around, it's not just sliding around, but the buckyballs are actually rotating. Like little.
So what you're saying is nanoparticle goes brrr.
Nanoparticle goes brrr.
Yes.
Amazing.
That's so cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I think we fixed that then.
Yeah.
Healing potions are
There were
universal
no jangling
nanobots.
questions.
Yeah.
Nothing whatsoever.
I haven't written any notes down, but I'm going to write nanobots healing universal. Yeah, okay.
I was lecture
Some
notes.
future
Is this?
reference,
I was
yeah.
supposed to be on the test.
I'll get the PDF from the
Nanite,
website. It'll be
sequel,
fine.
nanobots. I don't know.
Yeah.
There was all sorts of awesome shit in the chat, which we couldn't talk about.
Twitch chat.
Yeah, Twitch chat,
chat.
twitch.tv/Simon
Oh, that one.
Yeah, that one, the one we're on right now. Yes, some really interesting contributions there. I like the idea of these being steam powered, as if that doesn't make things exponentially more difficult.
Wait,
Because
Infinite
most of
Sky
your body is water, right? So, you know.
Not being
The
steam
temperature
powered.
gradient, it's over like nanometers.
Everything's steampunk.
I mean, I suppose you could use it as like a heat engine. Like there'd be a...
I'm not being steam powered.
Oh, I love
No,
steam.
I'm not. I have to have like an AI system.
Everyone's just got
And
cool
unless you
little
can come
goggles.
up with.
Little steampunk.
Oh, that's true. We could just turn
Officer.
into a full
Yeah.
steampunk.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh,
No, I have AI.
as we go
We're
on, the
responding
technology
to
in the
the
series just regresses. Braxiganti becomes more and more steampunk.
I mean,
Infinite
there
Sky
an
is actually just a
awesome-
person wearing a mask. And
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be like that in Men in Black. You know, there's the one where they find Orion's the galaxy and like
in the little cat
Orion's
tank.
belt.
yeah, but like
No
the owner
spoilers.
is like it looks like a human, but then like the face comes open and there's just a tiny little alien like pulling levers. And stuff.
Spoilers for Men in Black that we didn't warn people. What if they
Yeah,
haven't
Men in
seen
Black
it yet?
spoilers. Men in Black
They haven't
spoilers.
fully intended
We're going to have to
watch.
put that at the beginning of the podcast.
If you haven't
Wow.
seen the movie Men in Black from 1997, please skip forward to 30 minutes.
I was actually
Please
having a
watch it now,
conversation
because it's
with
so
a friend
good.
who hasn't watched it, and I told them off. I was
It's
like,
great.
you have to go and watch it right.
It's
right
a
this second.
great film.
I really like the song from the second one. Nod Your Head
What
is a
song?
Oh
classic.
yeah. I remember.
not gonna
Anyone
sing
else
it.
remember the animated series? There was a
No.
Men in Black animated series that was on CBBC for a little while.
Oh, amazing.
And I remember thinking it was amazing that they got Will Smith to do it, and it wasn't
Did
Will
they?
Smith. No, it definitely wasn't. It was like the classic thing of somebody pretending to be a voice actor, and you're a kid. You're like, oh yeah, that's definitely Will Smith.
Yeah.
And now I listen to it back, and it's just so obvious.
Oh, well.
But that
Oh,
was only
okay.
so that was like one of the things that we said we wanted to talk about this D&D brief, the health potions and nanites. The other thing that was really cool was whilst we were going to definitely not a space tavern, we noticed the graffiti on the walls that was in a variety of languages, and one of them was dwarv-ish with a V. We decided, right? There's dwarves, not
It just is
dwarves.
dwarvish. Like,
I mean, there are two. Okay,
Sorry.
Indeed, if it's D&D, then yes, it's with a V.
Yeah.
What, Ali? What was your concept for dwarvish? Because you're the man with all of the answers to this right now.
I am, and ever shall be. It was that. So you walk in, and you see this sort of all this graffiti on the walls, right? And I mean, graffiti is hard enough to read as it is, right? But instead of just being in a language, it's part of it is in what we might recognize as language, and then part of it is switching to what you might recognize as computer code, and then even more, you might even see, a bit of binary in there, like. It's essentially just subsuming what we think of as computer code language into our natural language. This is kind of what I've been looking at over
Seems
the last
very
week.
impractical.
Why?
Well, mainly because I can't read computer code, so I'd just be there going like, "What's this bit? Like, what? Yeah, what's the advantage? What can you say with computer code, like quicker and easier? What kind of things are you conveying?"
I guess think about it like this, right? So a lot of the dwarves who we've met, right, their sort of defining feature is that they're quite heavily cyberneticized, not a word. And so the question you've got to ask really is how are they communicating with their cybernetic bits?
Oh,
Right.
Yeah, that is a good question.
And then the next question becomes, they might be communicating with them. Are their cybernetic bits communicating back? So
Yes,
What-
presumably.
what does that feel like? How does that manifest itself in your mind? And might it be that, you know, the way you feel like you have an internal monologue, which is in the language that you speak, if part of you speaks code, might that work its way into your internal monologue?
I have a personal anecdote actually in relation to that. When I was no, trust me. When I was learning to code for the first time at Oxford, the first language that we used was C, and I really, really found it difficult. And I was like obsessed with trying to understand this like new way of like communicating. I had a dream in C once. Like I literally dreamed in programming language, and it was the weirdest thing. But so I kind of can understand like how that might work, because it was like I was seeing the lines in front of me, but I felt what they were doing, like what action they were taking. It was really strange, but I think
what happened in the dream.
That's amazing. Tell us more.
I think I was trying to approximate pi or something. It was like,
oh wow,
You're
such
classic.
a nerd.
well, because it was like one of those program like tasks that they give you when you're first learning a language. There's like a few set things that you might try to do, and it was like, I definitely remember there was a loop in there, and it was like you define all your variables at the start, and then it was like you're changing the information as you go through line by line, and then there'd be a loop where you get better and better at something. But I just remember like I could see the code in front of me and knew what it meant, and I somehow felt connected to what the lines were doing. It was really weird.
I got a question.
My God.
So when that was happening, how did you feel like the language, the code language, was expressing itself? Was it like normal language where you can kind of express anything, your feelings, emotions, questions, anything like that, or did it feel more like a set of instructions which you just had to follow?
Yeah, it felt like a set of instructions. I didn't feel like there was a huge amount of agency in like interpreting it. It was like this is a set of instructions that is being executed right now. You don't have much say in the matter, but you are feeling the process taking place.
Right.
That kind of gets to what I have been thinking, which, and stop me if this is all bollocks, but
Ali, everything we're talking about is bollocks. We were talking about nanorobots fixing
we haven't got to that NPC yet.
It's real. It's real.
Oh, the bollock boy. No,
Bollock
he's not
boy!
Raisin head.
Shriveled raisin.
I don't know why I'm pushing this. Yeah, shriveled raisin man.
This is a character we
That's
met
what
in
he
the last
is.
episode.
Or thing.
We didn't meet him though.
Yeah, you just looked
We
at
just
him.
looked at him and then didn't go
sir,
to him.
you have a ball sack for a head.
We've all made such
ignored
awkward characters that we were all like, well, guess that's that then.
Highlighting that NPC DM, we're gonna go
I think
to the forest.
my
now.
character was like, oh, good excuse to leave the bar. Yeet!
Yep. Infinite Sky was
Yeah.
like, you want to go outside? Absolutely.
So you were talking about bollocks.
Storyline we'll be leaving. I was, yeah. Thank
Tell
you.
us your bollocks.
Yeah, so the difference between formal and natural language. So because our language is natural language and it has rules, but those rules are not, those rules are flexible and they're very complicated and they may change depending on the context that you're in. And so there is no one set of rules, whereas a formal language is a set of logic-based rules that you must follow in order to read a particular piece of language.
Yeah.
And so computer code is formal language and natural language is what we use. And I was really interested in hearing how you felt your dream code, how you felt that, because that's a formal language inserting itself into what would normally be the natural language of dreaming. And if it did feel like this is a logic gate system that you have to now follow, to me it feels like the difference between choosing to move your arm and having a reflex action of like knocking your elbow.
Yeah.
You know you're moving your elbow, but you can't do anything about it.
Oh, that's a really good comparison. I really like that.
I'd like to point out that I am not alone. Cass in chat is saying that she has dreamt in JavaScript in the past.
Wow.
The part of her brain
Congratulations.
troubleshooting what she was working on before she went to sleep. And in case it helps Ali, when I go to sleep thinking of coding issues, I speak in the coding language in the video. I assume she means dream, and I'm talking to the issue itself as if it's an entity.
So
Oh
can
god,
you pose?
it's like
questions
the end
in
of
code?
Matrix Revolutions. That's how I'm imagining that. Talking to the
opinion to some huge stuff full of spoilers for Matrix Revolutions.
If you haven't seen the movie Matrix Revolutions, don't.
I haven't seen any of the Matrix.
You haven't seen any of the Matrix?
You haven't seen the Matrix 1?
The first one.
No, I haven't seen any of
Watch
them.
one.
Because I feel like I've seen everything about like the red and the blue pill, and I feel like I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the like
All of it.
slow motion
You're right, you
backbend.
do.
Like I know what happens in the Matrix.
No.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Watch it as a trans allegory, and suddenly it's like an extra level of how amazing that film is.
Okay, that
I've
sounds better.
rewatched it since. Yeah.
Sounds better. I was just going to say, when I have dreams like that, it's just because I've played too much like Tetris or something.
I was going to
and
say,
I
it's just the Tetris blocks just falling. Gotta get the long one. Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no! I've got to release.
That sounds really anxiety-inducing.
Have you never played a game so much that you see it before you go to bed?
Yeah.
Like,
It's just obsessively
Yeah.
playing in your mind.
yeah.
I was playing
Tetris sounds like
Subnautica.
the worst one that you could possibly
I
have.
love Tetris.
Tetris is
But like you're just dreaming, getting more and more anxious. It's like
Yeah.
you're-
Yeah, things are going faster and faster. You're losing
And
control.
now you understand my brain.
So, right, the formal natural language thing.
Yeah.
What Cass is saying is super interesting, and because it seems to me from the outside, having never dreamt in code, that the point of part of the thing that comes wrapped up in code is because your code is you're basically trying to you're ordering a slave system, the computer, to do a series of things, right? The computer can't express its own will and answer back. Code's not built to do that. It is simply instructions. And so I was wondering, like, how you would integrate that into natural language. Where, maybe some of them is obviously if you're giving an instruction to someone, but it might be like, let's say, natural language. It depends on the context that you're in, on how you read it. Different words can mean different things. Grammar can be different. Maybe the code is the one invariant in that situation. So the code tells you, it puts you in a context and says, this is how you can understand the rest of this natural language. And that's the sort of beginning of the rest of your...
It's almost like importing a library. You're like,
Yes!
import casual social situation, and then initiate, go.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then suddenly you can read the language around you, like, oh, I see, I'm at a cocktail party. Jesus.
Well, that's kind of how I guess we subliminally do it, right? Like when we walk into a situation, you're like, yes, I'm in a gathering of 40 people, and they are all drunk. Yeah, okay, I'm set. And then you have
Yeah.
a set of instructions.
It's true.
The other thing that your idea though, Ali, of that's how you communicate with organic and synthetic components is either there is a standard language across all components, or you run into translation issues
Oh no!
if your limbs can't talk to you.
Oh no!
So-
Who designed
No,
this?
Totally.
you're the one with the mechanical arm that's going to get fucked by this, Simon.
Yeah.
So don't give him ideas.
Oh.
But listen, so there's part of it is like, can your mechanical arm come and be part of your thoughts, right? In which case you sort of having a conversation with it as it's happening. But another thing is, right, let's say instead of having a code is too simplistic. A set of instructions for your very complicated mechanical arm is not enough. What you need is for it to have natural language of its own so that it can explore environments without you having to order it around, right? And then come back, like an octopus's arm, right? Which has its own little brain.
Why would you want that? I want my arm to do only what I say. I do not.
I don't want to wake up with my own arm choking me to death.
Yeah.
Like,
Why would you want that?
you're the one that's been ruining all of your plans. I got him. You wake up being choked. Like, stop. You got third lord of robotics within your own body.
Okay, not getting good feedback on that. But
Sorry.
no, but octopuses each of their legs has a mini brain in it, and then there's a sort of overarching mega brain that sits in the head, which, and it, whenever the arms find something interesting, they're like, "Oh, I found something interesting. I better tell the super brain." So maybe it could be like that.
Well, the other thing would be,
Delegation.
I don't know, that's scary.
if you wanted to get around the whole translation issue, like what if a component came with firmware installed, like it had its own language that then interfaced with your neural operating system, but presumably that firmware would evolve to better integrate with you as a person and probably have some kind of memory in it. What happens then if you get a component that was previously attached to somebody else and has potentially part of them within the firmware?
Oh, no.
You've hit the nail on the head there, Simon. What does happen?
Oh my
It's
God.
such a good point.
But what if you get
Didn't
mechanical
Josephine just
legs?
get, like-
You get mechanical legs that were previously on a dancer, and suddenly you're just like, what? I can rumba now.
Oh, that would be cool.
That's a really good point though, because like people
Lend
talk
me
about
your
muscle
legs.
memory.
I've
Imagine how much.
got to go on a date. Can you lend me your legs so that I can actually
you're
dance
great
with
at
this
dancing.
person?
Amazing.
If my muscles have muscle memory, I guess that's probably not really stored in the muscles. But like, why not? And especially if it was slightly self, it didn't all have to come from instructions for the brain. They were sort of slightly independent. Then yeah, you could get different limbs to be good at doing things, not just mechanically because it's got a claw on, but also it could do the movements well.
So the question
itself.
is, what do you feel when that's happening? Do you feel like this is just a sort of thing that's happening to me? I'm dancing the rumba, or do you feel the sensations of knowing how to dance rumba?
I wonder if
And
there's
then
if
could
there's
you
like,
take that back?
is there like
can
a
you
shadow?
integrate it into yourself?
Is there a shadow of the previous personality of the user somehow in the firmware because of how they used to use that thing? You perceive.
I guess
that.
it depends what it is, right? Like you may maybe taking someone's knee is not going to be much of an issue, but taking someone's hand might be it's incredibly personal sort of part of the body.
Well, talking of movies again, what was it called? Like, it's called like The Eye or something, and it's a really bad horror film, but someone gets a cornea transplant and then starts seeing, like, I don't think it's dead people. I watched it so long ago.
bad.
But the idea is that like part of the person from before like takes over. It's a horror film. There's no science in it.
That is nearly as bad as Wild Wild West. Do you remember what happens with eyes in Wild Wild West?
No.
When somebody sees somebody is murdered, and they're like, right, we've got to work out what killed them. The last thing they saw must have been imprinted on their eyes. So they put like a lantern within their head, and then like light shines out of their eyes to form the image of the last thing they saw.
Eyes work.
Brilliant.
Some of the worst science I've ever seen.
That's amazing.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So this is the opposite of how a lot of brain-computer interfaces currently work, where you have to spend ages training them. You have to spend ages getting to know it. Like, it's like learning to play a computer game, but like way more confusing and with your brain.
So part of this is currently brain-computer interfaces, as you've just said, are incredibly simple and dumb. And what they do, for the most part, is that they use the EEG. So that's just the combined, or like the electrical activity at different parts of your skull. So, they'll put a set of electrodes on your head. And yes, those things is what it is. And EEG is famously incredibly low resolution. So it could divide your head up into a few different bits, but that's it. So all the computer can see is a few different bits of your head saying high activity or low activity. And so all the complexity of your thought is basically condensed down to, I can turn the left bit of my head on or the left bit of my head off, or the right bit of my head on or the right bit off. And then using that, the computer says, oh, the left bit's on, I'll go left. The right bit's on, I'll go right. And that's it. And it's like, if you were, tell me about if you like this analogy or not. I was working on it quite hard. It's like,
so please like it. Give me your honest feedback, but I did spend hours doing this and I will cry.
I will leave if you say it's bad. So,
but no, give me your honest opinion.
I really want to know what you think. But my entire sense of self hinges on it.
So
I won't be destroyed if you don't like it. Like, honestly, I really just want just tell me your thing.
It's like if you were to try and work out what was happening on a computer simply by looking at the brightness of the screen.
I like it.
That's lovely. Well
a
done.
lot of
What
Thank
a
you.
great
Thank
analogy.
you. That's paid off.
Round of applause. Well done.
Well done,
I'm really
Ali.
proud of you, Ali.
That was 8 hours well spent.
Yeah.
I really feel that, guys. Actually, I feel quite emotional.
It's funny you mention that. I actually am working on a project at the moment where I want to try and control a program via an EEG cap.
Cool.
I've always been tempted to try it, and if I can justify doing it for a video, then like I can just dork out and it's technically work. So
Cool.
I might actually have to give you a call about that, Ali.
I do.
I mean, in terms
It's
of
not like I have them in my house.
Well, no, I'm going to buy the cap.
brain guy.
I'm imagining that you basically do a principal component analysis on the output. So you have like training data, and then you identify, patterns.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what Shams, you were saying about you need to train it, because it doesn't, you don't know how to turn the right bits of your brain on, as it were, as far as the EEG can see. You don't know. So some people think about it's like you have to think about moving your left hand or something, and then that suddenly turns it on, and then the machine goes, oh, that's it. And then you have to practice turning the machine on by thinking about moving your left hand. And it's all just a bit kind of crap. But you can get, you can put electrodes within the brain itself if you really want to do it. But even then, we don't really understand the code. So
Neuralink is doing that, right?
Yeah, that's what they're doing it, right? But
you don't have to understand the code if you do training. Like, you don't have to understand it. You just
that massively decreases the number of options you have when you're trying to communicate with the thing. Unless it's got incredibly sensitive, unless it's so sensitive that you thinking of eating dinner with your mother yesterday versus eating dinner with your mother.
In our design, these things are semi-independent, so they already know the range of specialised things that they need to do, and they've got some sort of autonomy. I quite like that as a way to get around swapping in and out prosthetics.
What?
Because you don't. I quite like the idea that you don't have to fully be able to tell them exactly what to do, because they have sort of default settings. Like, because we're talking about like mining colony, like people with mining equipment essentially as part of their bodies. There's probably a limited number of things that extension is supposed to do. You swap out your different arm.
Yeah. In fact, if you were going to a kind of scrap metal dealer, you would be like, listen, I need an arm which has done 30 years worth of, ore.
10,000 miles. It's in good shape apart from that.
Exactly. And then you get it on. You're like, boom, now I can work in the mining colony, even though I've never mined.
Sorry, was that a hint? Was that a breadcrumb that was supposed to follow it? Don't do it. Everyone, next episode, if someone offers you a mining arm, don't take it.
You're not breaking my robot apart. Like, you're the one with the mechanical arm. You have to do it.
We tried to get a job in mining last episode, and she was like, no, it's not mining.
I'm still not over this.
True.
You decided our backstory was that we were going to be archaeologists on the planet that has just been terraformed.
I forgot.
Well, there's no history.
Also, it was then pointed out to me that archaeologists aren't usually the ones digging up fossils, which is what I claimed we were looking for.
Yeah, paleontologists.
It's almost like we didn't know what we were talking about.
You're the one with the high. You know that meme from Invincible where it's like, think,
she's charisma though. She's not. Are you intelligent?
Not the int. No.
Yeah, true.
I technically do, but not going Infinity's way.
I wanted us to be like the characters in The Mummy. That's why I wanted to be archaeologists.
Oh, no, that's
or Indiana Jones.
Other films I haven't seen.
I just thought
What?
Don't tell me off.
I just wanted to be cool, okay? I thought we'd be cool archaeologists.
Name a film that you've seen, and I will tell you if it was a better use of your time than watching The Mummy or The Matrix.
Well, when I think of The Mummy, I think of Brendan Fraser.
Correct.
I have watched George of the Jungle a billion times.
Okay, yeah. You're putting that man's kids through college. Like, bless him, we love Brendan Fraser.
Oh, God, he's so great. That scene with the horses in George of the Jungle.
What?
Do you not know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
With my little brother at a school.
Okay, you need to watch it again, and especially that scene. Just look up George of the Jungle horses scene.
Science,
everybody.
Anything with Brendan Fraser in doesn't count. Name another film you've watched.
Before you do that, I have more.
Tell us the science, Ali. I want to hear the science. Look at Brendan Fraser clips on YouTube later.
I looked up on the internet.
I read this meme on the internet.
On the internet, I went on it. It's amazing. And
this is an excellent rectangle. It plays all of my songs.
It's his phone for podcast listeners. It's a phone.
So this is really relevant to Cass and you actually, Simon, because they did an experiment was carried out where they did an MRI scan of people when they were reading code versus people when they were reading natural language to see if they activated the same brain areas, and they don't. The natural language activates very specific language areas, and the computer code uses the multiple demand system. I do not know what that is, but it sort of involves the frontal lobes, and it's a general kind of logic puzzle solving system. So you don't treat code like language, even though we call it that. And even more interestingly, maybe, you don't use the same system you use for maths, which is another system of logic. It's similar, but it's not quite the same.
Maths has its own special area in the brain that's just the maths.
Well, it's not just the area. I think it's the way it uses the areas. But yeah, so there you go. That's hot off the press. That was like this year that came out. And I emailed the author to be hey, would it be different if all these people were experts? Would they think it was a language then? You know, if you're an expert coder, would you be reading it like a language? And she said, nobody knows because that's not been done. But
scientists.
More funding required.
Didn't study that.
Yes, exactly.
Do you have a grant for me?
I'll tell you the answer if you give me money.
yeah. She said intuitively, she would imagine that it's the opposite, that the more you do code, the more you realize it's not a language. It's its own thing.
Even considering the difference, as we talked about, between natural language and what was the other one?
Formal language.
Formal language.
That's the point. Is that formal language? Yeah.
So are you saying that formal language isn't a language at all?
Yeah.
I'm saying that the brain doesn't treat it as one. Yeah.
It doesn't swap in and out in the same way. Like, you know, when you learn different languages and you kind of swap words between them because you kind of treat them as the same thing. That code doesn't.
And you're also saying that maths is separate to both of those. So maths isn't a language and it's not a formal language. To be brutally frank, it uses the same system, but it doesn't use it in the same way. Right.
So it's not quite the same as maths. But so that comes back to whether you could actually integrate formal language into natural language, like we're saying that the dwarves do, because this would suggest that no, you couldn't, because they're different things, unless, as we suggested, you taught the machine parts to read, to have their own natural language, which could then integrate into the language areas. Maybe, I don't know.
Wow, that's really cool.
I'm imagining that the graffiti on that bar was like instructions, like open door, move 6 steps towards bar area, exchange money for goods and or services.
I thought you were going to be like, turn to page 314, and you turn there and there's just like a cock and ball's been drawn or something. Like every textbook that you ever used in school.
Yeah.
More likely for graffiti, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, finally, I guess, thinking about, this is the final thing I did anyway, thinking about the code, actually, you've got to think, what kind of computers are going to be around then, even? So I tried to understand quantum computing and failed, but the one thing I did learn is that it probably can't use the same code as the standard computers that we use, or at least we don't know what kind of code it can use.
Okay, right. Now, my understanding of quantum computing is that basically is that because the previous way that computers work was on Boolean logic gates, ultimately. Like, it's just logic statements within the electronics. And quantum computers don't use those exact same gates. Is that the reason why we can't use the same language?
Yes, I think so. Let me just say that as I wrote it out so that we can all... So computers talk in binary, right? That's what the ones and zeros are. And that's whether your transistor is high, like letting current through or not letting current through. So it's like a switch. Is it on or is it off? And then everything else flows from that. So everything your computer does is just a series of off or on switches. Quantum computers, instead of using an off or on switch as their carrier of information, what they use is the spin or possible spin of an electron or something or another thing which has spin at an atomic level. And so the thing about, let's just assume it's an electron for now. The thing about the spin of electrons is that before you measure them, they are in multiple positions at the same time.
Yeah, because quantum.
It's not yes or no, it's perhaps.
It's like,
exactly.
Maybe everything.
But it's like, maybe this one more, maybe that one less, but you don't know.
But as Andy's saying in chat, surely that means, though, the difference is in the machine code. Like, when we write code, we're not dealing with the bits individually. Like,
Andy, you're totally right, I think, because I don't know. But but maybe not as well, because, wait for it, so computing as it is now runs one function after another function after another function, right? It just does everything linearly. Whereas quantum computing works in parallel. Everything is computed at the same time. All the possible answers are worked out, and the most probable one is your real answer. So actually, it's not like writing just do this, and then this. It is a whole different way of calculating the possible answer. That is the limit of my understanding.
We'll pick the best one.
Yeah, so how you get to that state means that you can't actually, you can't do normal style computations with it, or you wouldn't, because it's a thing that is about calculating everything at the same time and then working something out at the end, rather than doing a load of simple instructions, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's such a nascent field that presumably a lot of this still needs to be worked out, right? Like, on a fundamental level, we know they're different, but we don't know how practically we'd use one, because no one's practically used one.
Apparently some people have written what they imagine quantum code might look like, but there is no quantum computer really, apparently, to test it on.
Because I know there's enough connections of logic gates, and like IBM have done one. I think there's one there was another lab, like Bell Labs, I think. But like, they're still so primitive compared to electronic computers in terms of the output. Like, obviously they're way more sophisticated, but like primitive in terms of how many gates
some of them do
they
some
have.
like basic maths, like adding up?
I think so.
There was a paper
so.
about that recently, but I forget what the answer was.
The
thing is, like, what I thought was interesting was that, so according to the person who I was listening to talk about this, what's interesting about quantum computing is not that it's just way more powerful than normal computing, full stop. It's more that it's a different kind of computing. So a lot of the kind of simple functions that we would do day to day with computing, you'd still use the kind of computers that we use. So in Braxigantu, it's highly likely that they're not using quantum computers all the time. They're still using the same sort of things we would use.
Because the other thing about quantum computers is they are far more delicate, at the moment at least, than electronic computers, because you had to preserve the quantum states. Like, they have to be in almost perfect isolation. So using them in a rugged environment would require a literal quantum leap in like how practically they store information.
Yeah, that's it.
You should also go and watch Quantum Leap.
What's that?
That's the one with Captain Archer and Scott Bakula
and Gimli.
Gimli's
Captain
in it.
Archer and Scott Bakula.
Yeah, Scott Bakula.
And Treebeard, because he's Treebeard as well, isn't
Scott Bakula.
I've seen Lord of the Rings.
Also, fun fact,
Yay,
Gimli in Lord of the Rings, most of the time you see him on screen isn't John Rhys Davies. It was his stunt double. And he was on screen to such an extent that they nearly did a joint credit for John Rhys Davies, and I cannot remember for the life of me the name of the stunt double. But like, it's like 80% of the time it's another person. John Rhys Davies was basically just there for the close-ups and then did the faces.
Really?
Just because he was too tall.
He's like he's the tallest member of the fellowship. He's like 6'3". And also, he was allergic to the prosthetics, if I remember rightly. So every day it was like 4 hours of ow, ow, ow. And yeah.
Has anybody read or seen Dune?
I've just finished reading Dune.
And?
In
our movie recommendation podcast.
Oh, really?
We're now doing.
It.
Tell us more.
It's a really interesting book. There's fantastic ideas, but the pacing is all over the place. It is.
I love the pacing.
The problem is, it is about the principal character is a guy for whom the concept of time is very non-linear, and so like I get that is probably reflected. Yeah, like Paul is like
pretty linear.
No, but for Paul, like he sees stuff way into the future happening. Like the longer he spends
only at
on
the end.
But the longer he spends on Arrakis, the more time he spends not in the present. So like, but I just don't think that justifies the way that the book is.
Yes,
I'm gonna have to do an intro for this podcast and be like, there are potential spoilers for this film, this film, this film.
Potential spoilers for the following.
But the reason I bring it up is because in one of the setups that they have is that there's a sort of they cancel all machine-based intelligence, and they have
it's cancel culture gone mad.
They say none of that, and to do those sort of high-level calculations, they have these things called mentats, who are sort of people, but they're actually kind of supercomputers in person form.
What?
Yeah,
And
lubricated by the
What language
spice,
do they
right? Like they
speak?
take a chemical
Discuss.
that expands their
well, that's the
mental capabilities.
navigators, not necessarily the mentats.
Oh, I
but
thought the mentats did as well. Okay.
I think they happen to because they're all like druggies. But
It's a similar thing happens in the backstory of Warhammer 40,000, like about 20,000 years before the thing happens.
Spoilers!
Oh yeah, but that's not a spoiler. That is
If I
not
want
a
to go
spoiler.
watch Warhammer 40,000, you know?
But like at some point, several tens of thousands of years before the present in that setting, AI basically tried to overthrow humans, and so they outlawed all forms of advanced computers. So the way they got around it was just melding organics and mechanical components together. So you get like instead of having robots, you have criminals who have been lobotomized and given mechanical components to do basic tasks.
that feels like just a robot with a human body, no?
Oh, yeah, it's horrifying. It's like the worst possible fate is that you are sentenced to just be like a robot for hundreds of years, potentially like stacking boxes. Like it's a horrifying way to get around the problem. But they're like, well, what could we do? There was no AI.
There are still supermarkets 40,000 years in the future.
Well, technically, it's 38,000 years in the future
Warehouse.
because it is our universe, allegedly.
We're technically our
Like
universe.
ours, yeah.
Yeah.
Dungeons
Yeah, like
and Dragons
ours.
Science set in the
Yeah.
future. It's canon. That's why everything
It's
has to be
canon.
somehow
Which one is the
explained.
branch on the secret timeline? Which one is the
yeah.
intended
Are you watching
way?
it?
Yeah.
Are you what?
Stop it! I've got to watch
You've
this.
talked about June for ages. Let me and Simon talk about Loki.
You're totally right.
This podcast now will contain spoilers for Loki. No, it won't. Also, episode 4,
No, it
I was
won't.
just watching it being like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Worth
I
watching.
watched it at lunchtime today. Anyway, again, it's Loki. Me and Simon will talk about this separately in our Marvel chat.
Chat recommending The Mandalorian.
Oh yeah, apparently Pedro
Yeah.
Pascal
Watch
was
that either.
barely in The Mandalorian.
Like, they've
I've
got
seen
all
some
the
of the Star Wars
recommendations here.
films.
Well done.
So only some of them are good, to be fair. Like,
Yeah.
2 of them, really.
More than 2 of them are good. They're good. They're fun.
I'm getting through them. Okay,
fun.
I'm working my way through.
3 of them are so bad they're good. Like, the first 2 are good. The third one is... it's alright.
We haven't confirmed our numbering system before we started talking about first, second. Like,
Oh, I
this
meant
is classic.
chronologically. I meant
Alright,
in the chronological release order.
Chronological release order. Oh, see, it's you got to specify these things. Anyway.
Anyway, remember when this was about
We shouldn't
science?
Go on recommending shows. Like, enough of that.
Right.
Enough of that.
So I feel like that's probably a good place to draw a curtain over.
I think it
Like,
is. I think
discussion.
it is.
Drop the safety curtain, Jesus!
Ali's
Get
our
out
stage
while we
manager
still
being
can.
like, just pull the curtain, pull the lights.
Set fire to something, God!
So that was our discussion, and we basically agreed that nanites may or may not be health potions.
They are. No, I think we have
I've
agreed.
written
Yeah,
my
they-
notes.
We've agreed
It's
that.
canon because it's in my notes. All right.
Yeah.
Ali, take note of my notes.
It is
yeah.
canon now, and
Yeah.
to all this, that I love that discussion of the potential of. Like, especially this idea of firmware potentially retaining memories of previous activity and previous users on mechanical components. That's that's really, really cool. And well, the thing is, we still got plenty to talk about. We didn't even touch on the idea of like hit points as a concept within our universe.
We're going to get to that. And also, I was thinking about this when we were talking about it, and I didn't say anything. Short rests, long rests, you're
No,
fine.
no,
Have a sleep,
yeah, how does
broken
that
leg, sorted. And but you know, in the future, maybe there's something that whenever you fall asleep, you take a pill, and it does just reset everything.
But
we
what's the
can
point of
deal with
sleep
that.
anyway?
Who needs sleep?
Well,
I did a science check on that. There's lots of points of sleep.
lots of points. Sleep is good.
We should point out, if people aren't aware, we do 2 videos for every RPGeeks, like the mainline adventure series, the Dungeons and Dragons and Science, which are available on TikTok, and they're also available on YouTube as shorts.
Instagram.
I did one on extraterrestrial mining. We've all done one at this point, actually. So mine was
Yeah.
extraterrestrial mining. Emily, what was yours?
Mine was on stem cells, particularly plant ones.
Shalini?
I did something on sleep and sort of why we need it, or at least what happens if we don't get it.
And Ali?
Who knows? I think it was.
Ali has a lot of other things to think about as the
It was
DM.
cybernetic
forgotten.
implants.
It was
cybernetic
cybernetic,
implants.
It was.
Yes,
That's what it was.
was. You should definitely check them out, as well as checking out our main show where there's less science chat and more adventuring.
And about
dice.
400% more men with testicles for heads.
I don't know. A large part of tonight was men with testicles for heads. So
No, we were talking bollocks.
more than
Different
ideal.
thing. But that's I think a good point to end it. So we'll be back next week with the Dungeons and Dragons and Science Adventure, episode 3 on Braxagantu, which you'd be very welcome to join us for. Same time,
Excited.
7
Oh,
p.m.
Who was that
Cannot
random
wait.
guy at the end?
Who
was he?
He didn't even have a ball for a head. Like, oh, no,
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Is he going to
Uh-oh.
kill us? We don't know. People
so
just stab
excited.
people on Braxagantu, so
it's a wild westy world.
So we'll find. So join us for the next episode of Westworld, Space Edition.
Spoilers!
7 p.m. next Thursday on twitch.tv/.SimonClark and available on podcast and YouTube. All the social links will be down below. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. And do you want to say goodbye, everybody else?
bye.
Thank you.
Us?
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
You can sound a bit more.
Bye.
Can I get? Sorry, I'm not stagehand. The microphone's come down. Sorry, can I just get a bit more enthusiasm on that? Right. So, and it's goodbye from everyone else.
Bye.
There we go. Woo! Science.
Bye.